Hey everybody, I thought I had that on fade out and it just stopped when I hit the button. But anyway, welcome back to From Beyond. Lee G and myself here, your congenial host tonight. Lee, how you doing?
I'm fine, thank you very much. And hi, ladies and gentlemen, how you doing? Good to see you.
Good to see
Good to see you,
everybody
Steve,
here.
as well. Hi,
Yeah, you
Steve.
too. Who all we got here? I got Andrew Gnomes Trucking, John Keller, Connecticut's Most Wanted. Ted Branston's in the house. D-Rock's here, and Cam Keksa. And just so everybody knows, we're doing it not only on YouTube, on two channels. I'm doing it here and on 13 Past Midnight, but it's also on Facebook and
And Twitter.
Twitter. Yeah, so we're multicasting tonight, but welcome in and do a special thing about the vampires in New England here as we head into spooky season. And that kind of ties into another project Lee and I are working on that you'll know more about later on. But for
Indeed.
now, it is what it is. Let me
Oh,
go
ho,
ahead.
ho, 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 ho.
Love it. We got a video we're going to show you. We're going to talk about it. Let me go ahead and give a disclaimer for the video that we're going to show. The video falls under fair use, copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for the purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Lead or myself, anybody that has anything to do with From Beyond, the staff or management, does not own the content. All credits go to the rightful owner. No copyright infringement is intended. So there we go.
Indeed.
And tonight, what we've got the video portion of it, it's from the Tewksbury TV here in Massachusetts. I think the library put this together. But at one time, New Englanders actually believed that the undead walked among them in the dark bowers of the night. Feeding upon their kin, these ghouls petrified families for more than 100 years. Scores of families exhumed their loved ones looking for the spectral ghoul that plagued them. Accounts and actual newspaper articles help tell the story of how people once took desperate measures to rid themselves of what we know now as the New England vampire panic. Tom DiAgostino, author of The History of Vampires in New England, is one of the region's most well known writers and investigators of the paranormal. As founders of the Paranormal United Research Society, or PERS, Tom and his wife Arelene have been extensively studying and investigating paranormal accounts for over 28 years. Tom has authored many books, including A Guide to Haunted New England, Haunted Massachusetts, Haunted New Hampshire, Haunted Rhode Island, Pirate Ghosts and Phantom Ships, Abandoned Villages and Ghost Towns of New England. D'Agostino also builds musical instruments, rebuilds clocks and antiques, and collects rare books on New England legends, haunts, and folklore. So, it should be a great little video that we're going to show for you here. And
Yes,
I've got a
indeed.
thing that I want to read, but I'll just read it later on after we watch the video. But
All right.
welcome in, everybody. I guess we can go ahead and kick it off if you're ready, Lee.
Yeah, I'm all ready to go, mate. It's all ready there, and
Okay, here we go.
it's,
New England vampires.
let's chuck it up there. Here we go. Let us know if it's too loud, guys, because it is very loud here.
Great. So again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Tonight's program is called Vampires in New England. At one time, New Englanders actually believed that the undead walked among them in the dark of the night. Feeding upon their kin, these ghouls petrified families for more than 100 years. Scores of families exhumed their loved ones looking for the special ghoul or the spectral ghoul that plagued them. Accounts and actual newspaper articles help tell the story of how people once took desperate measures to rid themselves of what we know as the New England vampire. So Tom D'Agostino is the author of The History of Vampires in New England. He is one of New England's most well-known writers and investigators of the paranormal. As founders of the Paranormal United Research Society, Tom and his wife Arelene have been extensively studying and investigating paranormal accounts for over 28 years. I'm sure it's been much longer. Tom has authored many books, including A Guide to Haunted New England, Haunted Massachusetts, Haunted New Hampshire, haunted Rhode Island, pirates, ghosts, and phantom ships, and abandoned villages and ghost towns of New England. Tom builds, in his spare time, Tom builds musical instruments, rebuilds clocks and antiques, and collects rare books on New England legends, haunts, and folklore. He also cares for 3 cats and a rabbit. So all 65 of us or so, let's give a big round of applause to Tom for joining us here tonight. And Tom, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah, Arlene and I, we've been traveling all over New England, and we've done so much research on the history, folklore, and haunts of the region. Actually, our 15th book will be out this September, and you could look for it on tomdagostino.com or Dining with the Dead 1031. But tonight we're going to talk about something that in New England that actually happened for over 100 years, and it's been swept under the rug, I guess, maybe out of shame, I'm not sure, but for over 100 years, New England was plagued with the vampire scare. Now, the vampires of New England weren't like, you see in TV, they bite people and everything. What the belief was is that the spirit of the deceased rose from the tomb and fed upon the family members. The member of the family would become ill, gaunt, pale, color would be gone from them. They cough up blood and turn, and they would pass away. And then they were supposed to come back and feed upon a family member also. They call this a spectral ghoul. The word vampire was never used in early documentation. But one thing that they were sure of is that as long as the body remained in a hole in the grave, even decomposing, it would feed upon the family members. What it really was consumption, or as we know, tuberculosis right now, but they called it consumption. And there was a belief that in New England, the idea or cultural belief was that if you cut out the heart, the liver, the lungs, and you fed the ashes with some sort of medicine to the inflicted, it was most likely to cure them. So they actually cut out the heart, liver, and lungs from the suspected vampire, burned it to ashes, and then fed it to the ill person of the family. Now, this mixed superstitions with many cultures that, of course, that came to this country. Voltaire, in fact, the famous writer, he wrote one time that a vampire was a corpse that sucked blood from the living until they became ill, contracted consumption in their weakened state, and then passed away. So this was really something that actually happened. In many cases, people around New England, if hundreds, if not thousands of families dug up their loved ones in hopes of curing the ill members of the family of this infliction. Anyway, the first documented vampire case, it took place in the Oldie Cemetery area in Willington, Connecticut in 1784. We're going to be talking about all documented cases tonight of these vampires, or whatever you want to call them, spectral ghouls, and the families and how they dealt with it. Isaac Johnson was a man farmer in Wellington. 2 children died of consumption. A foreign doctor they referred to as a quack, believe it or not, he was Romanian. Go figure, right? Vampires, Romania. They referred to him as a quack. He said, because when his wife became ill, the doctor said, look for a vine or sprouts growing from coffin to coffin or inside the coffin, and remove those, and you will find this will kill the infliction, and you will have also removed your vampire. Well, they dug up the coffin, and several newspapers came to record this wonderful, account of vampirism, and they did not find any vines, but they did decide to remove the vitals of the last person who had died and burn them. The cure failed, and his wife did pass away. People began looking for the Johnson family in the Oldie Cemetery because many of them were buried there. But we recently found out that the Johnson family is buried on their family plot in Connecticut, Wellington, on the old farm, but also the members of the family moved to Massachusetts. So any remaining members, like Isaac, were in Massachusetts, and that's where they remain. That's where they'd be buried. But at least 30 to 40% of Connecticut's colonial graves are accounted for. However, that means 70, 60, 70 are not. So you're going to find in many cases that these families were doing this in the dead of night in their family cemeteries. And that's why we have perhaps hundreds, if not thousands, of cases like this. The next case took place in Dummerston, Vermont. And Lieutenant Spaulding he was a lieutenant in the French and Indian Wars, and believe it or not, in the Revolutionary War, he wasn't a uneducated person. He was also part of the legislature for Vermont. So in many cases, these people were very intelligent people, but with the people in the family dying of consumption left and right, they had nothing to turn to but superstition. And this is when they turned to these exorcisms and vampirism. This took place in around the same area as the Burton case. He had several children that died in rapid succession from 1782 to 1793. Now, you may think 11 years, but several children in 11 years is a big amount. That happens to your family. And Lieutenant Spaulding himself actually died in 1788 at the age of 59. Many of them were young, 19, 20, 21. You could see Betsy Leonard, twin brother Timothy, in 1793. When this happened, they just realized, wow, we got to stop this, because one of the sisters, the last of the two living, contracted consumption. Now, all the boys were large in stature, yet they wasted away quickly, and all of them died before 40 years of age. The townsfolk knew that an exorcism was necessary. They had already tried it in a few other places. They had heard about it, in New England from other areas, and in some cases it worked. So they tried the strange belief of the vine growing across the coffin, and that didn't work. So what they did is they took the body of the last deceased, that would be John, and they burned it, figuring that would work. Well, the Bold sisters did live until a ripe old age, and so I guess this was a success in finding their vampire of the family. Unfortunately, almost the whole family was wiped out. In 1793, Rachel Harris Burton of Manchester, Vermont, died of consumption. Captain Isaac Burton, who was a congregational deacon, married Huldah after this, and she became ill. Well, when she became ill, very shortly after they were married, the townsfolk was saying, and even Huldah believed that Rachel, his first wife, was coming back to exact revenge on him for marrying so quickly. I guess he married within a year of her death. Now, the townsfolk and everything, they gathered at the town square, and the cemetery was right near the church there in the town square. His first wife was dug up, and of course she had been decomposing, because back then they did not have like they do. They didn't embalm like they do today. They just buried, especially if you died of consumption. They buried you within a day. It was really like that. So if you died in the morning, by the evening you were buried. If you died that night, by the next evening you were buried. And the funerals did take place in the evening most of the time. Anyway, they dug her up, and Jacob Mead presided over it. He was a blacksmith, and they put the heart of her in the lungs and removed it and burned it on his blacksmith's forge, and they had Huldah consume the remains of those ashes with some medicine. However, it was reported that 500 to 1,000 people turned out to this event. Yeah, they were selling balloons and all this stuff, right? It was a very big event, and people wanted to see it. But Huldah died in September of 1793, so the cure did not work for her. Why would they have a blacksmith when they did this? Well, because blacksmiths were thought to be charmers. They made, because they worked with fire, they worked with iron, and I'll get to that in a second. The signs they were looking for this vampire in their family, where they look for a bloated body. Now, we all know that when a body dies, and of course you're not embalming it, the corpse is going to bloat because you have decay going on, you have decomposition, and they also looked for pale flesh. Well, obviously, the person dies, their flesh is pale. But then they looked for the fingernails and hair to have grown. With the skin receding, that would naturally look like that's happening. Blood at the mouth. Now, of course, these people were coughing up blood, so when they died, and knowing that they died of consumption, you're not going to do an autopsy. They'd bury them. Any blood that was in the lungs would come out of the mouth. The corpse would be in little or no state of decay. This is going to be an interesting one later, because that did happen in many cases. Or jerking or gurgling when the organs were being removed. Of course, that would be the gases escaping. They did not know that in most cases. And fresh blood in the heart or other organs. Now, the one thing about the heart is it's a lot made of protein. It'd be the last thing to decay, so it would be very common to have blood found in the heart. However, many of these people were not aware of that. They were not medical surgeons or anything. So this was pretty interesting. And here's about the blacksmith. They had the power of iron, fire, and horseshoes. Parents actually, and I have accounts of this, where some blacksmiths wrote in their journals that they had parents taking their sick to them so they could pass them over the forge. They would pass the sick children over the forge or tap them 3 times with the hammer on the inflicted part of the body to cure them. They were also known as blood charmers who could stop hemorrhages. So believe it or not, blacksmiths were like early doctors per se. in a time when America medical practice was very, very ancient and arcane. In 1796, Cumberland, Rhode Island had its first town meeting on February 8th. A man named Stephen Staples appeared before the town council, and it's recorded in the town minutes, and prayed that he might have liberty to dig up the body of his daughter Abigail. She had been deceased and had caught consumption, but the sister, Lavina Chase, also contracted consumption, and Stephen Staples asked the town council that he would have liberty to dig her up. Well, the town council voted and said, yes, Stephen, you can dig up the body of your daughter, and after trying what experiments you wish to, bury the body again in a decent manner. So he actually was granted permission to dig up the body from the family cemetery. He performed experiments on it. Nobody knows what he did. It's not written, as he never recorded what he did, but he did bury his daughter back in a decent manner in the family cemetery. And whatever work they did do, it did not work, because Abigail being buried and everything, and Lavina died shortly after. But that was it. So if he thought it didn't work, maybe it did, because she was the only other one who died of consumption from the family. Now, in Rhode Island, there's over 3,000 cemeteries, the most in the United States, because almost everybody buried their loved ones on the family property until the advent of garden cemeteries around 1825. So this is why many of these cases may not be documented, but in this case it was documented because he went to the town council. This is the Staples Cemetery in Cumberland. As you can see, it's very old, and there are a few stones, but most of them are fieldstone markers, unmarked or crudely carved, like this one's here. And so you don't really know where Abigail Staples is buried, or Lavina. The other stones are marked from late 1860s. The Tillinghast family in 1799 in Exeter, Rhode Island. Stutley Tillinghast had a dream that he was an apple farmer. He had a dream that he lost half his orchard, which kind of disturbed him. And not long after his dream, one of his 14 children, Sarah, became ill and died of running consumption within like 3 months. Now, Sarah was the 10th oldest child. Between Stutley and his wife, Anna, they had 14 children that actually grew up to adulthood. Adulthood back then would be about 6 years old. So you reach 6 years old and that's it. You're working on the farm, you're doing something. At 10 years old, you're considered really an adult. Well, anyway, she died, and within 6 months, 5 more of the children died in rapid succession, all complaining that Sarah was visiting them in the night and inflicting pain in certain areas upon them. When it became time, after the 7th child became ill, they realized something had to be done. And you can see all the unmarked field stones where they died in rapid succession, because in those back then, you didn't have that kind of money, one, to have proper stones made for that many people who died in rapid succession. And 2, stone cutters weren't that prominent as well in certain areas. So you'd probably get a field stone marker, and you'd hopefully make one or have one made later, but in many cases they never did. So you see a lot of these field stone markers in these little family cemeteries. But they actually dug up Sarah and the 5 others, and they were looking for the vampire among them. And when they got to Sarah and dug her up, she was the first to die. They found not only had she not decomposed, but she was in perfect physical condition. Her eyes were open, they were blue, her hair was still blonde. I mean, she looked like she was alive almost. And they found her vampire, and they actually cut out her heart, liver, lungs, and they burned it. Whether they fed the ashes to the 7th child is not known, but we do know the 7th child did pass away, and they figured he was too far gone to save, thus concluding and fulfilling Stutley Tillinghast's dream of losing half his orchard. The rest of the children grew up and lived to be older and in later years married and whatnot. So yeah, he lost half his orchard. And with that exorcism, though, the vampire scare or spectral ghoul at this point scare ended. Now in Plymouth, this is one was written up in the Old County Memorial and Plymouth Advertiser, the first issue, May 4th, 1822. It says, in 1807, which would be that, 15 years ago, there was a opinion prevalent among the inhabitants that the body of a person who died by consumption was by some supernatural means nourished in the grave by some one living member of the family, and that during the life of this person, the body retained in the grave all the fullness and freshness of life and health. This strength was believed to be, this belief was strengthened by circumstance that whole families fell prey to this terrible disease. In this case, in Plymouth, 13 of the 14 children died of the disease within a year, leaving just a mother and one son. He soon took ill after the death of his 16-year-old sister. Now, the belief that these consumption was somehow create these people to die, when they die by supernatural means, they become spectral ghouls and feed on family members, was pretty intense.
It's on, but it's on mute.
It was resolved to the villages.
No, it has to be on mute.
It was resolved to the villages that they dug up this last 16-year-old sister, but instead of burning her vitals,
some technical difficulties in the original there.
Her over in the coffin,
yeah, it's not to do with us.
Thinking that she would get confused, and instead of digging her way out of the grave at night, she'd dig her way down into the ground earth even deeper. Now, this is kind of funny because when they did exhume her, they found her, what they said, lit up with the brilliancy of youthful health. Okay, so she had not, don't forget there were no embalming back then, so these people would start decaying within a day. So within a year, she had not supposedly decayed at all, so they figured she was feeding on the lifeblood of her family. Well, the funny part about this is that they turned her over in the coffin. Now, you're a spectral ghoul, you're a ghost, you have the power of all, evil to come out of the grave and feed on people, and you're going to be so stupid that you're going to dig down deeper if you face it in the wrong way. Which I didn't get, but they figured it was going to work. Well, the final child died, and the mother too, so the whole family was wiped out within a little over a year. The author of this article laid witness to the event, and he wrote a poem where the last line was, "The living was food for the dead," in which is the title of Michael Bell's famous book, Food for the Dead, which is a great book. Now, this is interesting. Frederick Ransom and his brother Daniel, in a manuscript, memoirs of Daniel Ransom. Frederick Ransom was actually a college student at Dartmouth College in Vermont. Daniel Ransom wrote this book later in his memoirs, and the memoirs in the book and the pages are in the library in Woodstock, Vermont. And we've seen it. We got the information from it. He wrote this many years after what happened. But when 21-year-old Frederick Ransom died of consumption in 1817, his mother became ill. His father had the body exhumed, and they had it burned in Captain Pearson's blacksmith forge. Now, Captain Pearson, being a blacksmith, again, being the power and that was believed could help cure everybody. Of course, she was fed the ashes, but the cure failed, and Mrs. Ransom died. His daughter died in 1828, and two more sons in 1830 and in 1832. Now, obviously, the blacksmith cure failed, but Daniel Ransom would write about this later because he was just a child when it happened, but it was published also in the Journal of American Folklore and in the Vermont Standard in 1890. The manuscript resides in Williams Public Library in the Woodstock Green. The Woodstock Green is where this took place. You can actually see it. It's a boat-shaped green, and that's where this exorcism took place. They set up a little blacksmith forge, and they burned, Frederick Ransom's innards. There's another event that took place there, which I'll get to in a second because it wasn't true. But in 1827, Nancy Young of Foster, Rhode Island, the daughter of Levi Young, who was also a captain in the wars, a legislature, a very intelligent person, became sick with consumption and died on April 6th in 1827. It wasn't long before her sister Elmira Young became very ill, and then she actually was within a year actually dead. But their family although Levi Young was a very intelligent person, they succumbed to the idea of the neighbors. And this was in the Foster Town Public Records of Foster, Rhode Island, and it says it right here, that by cremating or burning the remains of a departed friend or relative while the living relative stood around and inhaled the smoke, it would eradicate the disease from the systems of the living and restore them to health. Well, when Nancy died, the neighbors and friends at Mr. Young's request came together and exhumed her remains. They put her on a pyre, they lit the body on fire, and all the members of the family stood around and inhaled the burning, smoking remains, thinking it would actually restore them to health. They're standing around now inhaling a burning, rotting corpse. What do you think happened? Well, you don't have to guess. Elmira died at 17 years old. A son only died. Huldah died, and Caleb died, and Hiram died, and like a few others died. But although there was a 27-year between them, they still believed that the cure failed. Again, they didn't believe in consumption being hereditary, they thought it was, or something, but they didn't know it was a disease. I mean, it spread like wildfire. In 1720, Benjamin Martin said it was, a doctor said, no, this is a disease, man. You can catch it like the cold, like the flu. It's contagious. And they all said, nah. It wasn't until 1883 when Dr. Robert Koch proved it was a contagious disease. Now, you can see all the graves from in Force 142. There's a legend around Rhode Island that says, if you find graves like this that are crooked, that means evil spirits have escaped from them. And this is what the people believed once many years ago. In 1830, there was a Corwin case that was written by somebody who wrote the whole case up here, where the heart was burned again in the Woodstock Green, and the sickly brother was forced to drink some ashes mixed with bull's blood. Okay, they buried the urn with the vitals in it, and then they sprinkled bull's blood on it. But they found that none of these characters ever existed. No Corwins in the cemetery. None of the doctors' names, actually the doctors' names of Rhode Island doctors and people. And they did dig up the green at one point to do other things, and they never found a giant slab. be used to cover the pot full of ashes. So then they come to find out that it was a great fictional story based on the truth. Simon Whipple Aldrich of North Smithfield, Rhode Island, was the son of Colonel Dexter Aldrich. Now, he died in 1841 at 27 years old. He died of 20, and he was buried. And the thing about this is, although he did die there, his other sisters died shortly before him and some after him. Several children died within 19 years, of course. But there is no record of him ever being exhumed or any of the family being exhumed and exercised for vampirism. What is so strange about this account is what is carved on his stone. And this says, the only time a vampire is actually mentioned on the stone as blamed for consumption. And it says, although consumption's vampire grass has seized thy mortal frame. And then the rest is missing because the stone broke and somebody cemented it. And that's all you get. Whatever the rest of the saying was, although consumption's vampire grasp has seized thy mortal frame, is a proof that these people believed also that consumption and vampirism went hand in hand. The family cemetery is in the midst of a cluster of other cemeteries showing the evolution of the town in this case. In Jewett City, 1854, this is a good one, Lemuel Ray died in 1845. Henry Ray, the father, in 1849, and Elisha in 1851. When Henry Jr. began exhibiting signs of consumption in 1854, they decided to have the family exhumed and burn them on the spot. They did not burn the father, though. They just burned the two brothers, and the three, and Henry Ray ended up dying, of course. But the funny part about this was many newspapers showed up for this exorcism. You had the Journal, the Providence Journal at that time, the Norwich Courier, Norwich Bulletin, the Worcester Aegis. I mean, they had reporters left and right all hanging out there watching them dig up the bodies of their dead family and burning them because one of them was suspected a vampire. So the Norwich Courier wrote this in their part of their article, and it says, okay, some 2 years, since a fatal disease seized upon another son, whereas determined to exhume the bodies of the two brothers already dead and burn them. And for what reason do our readers imagine? Because the dead were supposed to feed upon the living. And as long as that dead body in the grave remained in a state of composition, either wholly or in part, the surviving members of the family must continue to furnish the sustenance in which that dead body fed. So if the dead body remained in the hole in the grave, the spirit was going to come back in the evening and feed upon a family member, taking them to the grave. These are the Ray family in Jewett City, their graves. And Henry Ray is buried a little further over, originally buried in another cemetery because he belonged to another church. But he's buried just a little to the right of them. Now, in 1990, some kids were sliding down, and this is in Jewett City area over there is Griswold, which Jewett City is a part of. They're sliding down a hill and sandbanks, and they're having a great time. And they run to the top of the hill, and they slide down, and they run back to the top of this hill and these sandbanks. They slide down, and they run to the top of the hill, and they slide down, and some skulls come along with them. And they realize that they just had skulls accompanying them down the hill. They scream running. So the police come in, and first thing they see is like the sandbanks that eroded some burials. And they call in the state archaeologist and a few other people because they want to find out what's going on here. Well, they start digging, and they come to one grave that gets their attention, and it's covered with slabs of granite. So they take these slabs, they remove them, and they find a coffin, JB55, with tacks on it. And you can see this picture here is the top of the coffin. When they open that coffin, they find that JB55 was, bones were arranged in a skull and crossbone manner. They also find two other coffins, IB45 and NB13, which suggests that a ritual was done to save one of those two. The ritual took place several years after JB was buried because there's no organs left. But so they probably said, well, if we take the the femur bones and we take the skull and they remove some of the rib bones and put in a skull and crossbones manner, that might work. Well, nobody knows whether it worked or not, but we did find something out. Recent DNA tests and research found that JB was John Barber, who died at 55 years old of consumption. And NB was his son Nathan, who died in 1826 at 13 years old of consumption, according to a newspaper article. And yes, the ritual took place to save either him or his wife. This is the only physical evidence we have, which is amazing, of the vampire scare, other than written record accounts. We actually have bones of a exorcised vampire that came to light by accident. This is something that can actually be seen and touched to prove it happened. They were reburied in this Walton cemetery, relocated from the sandbanks in a hidden area, which was kind of funny because they said they wouldn't let anyone know where the area is, so they didn't put any stones there, but it's the only area that's like no stones. And there were cures. Here's one: consumption can be cured. You can drink this wonderful syrup made of, where is it? It's made of squid and seaweed and mandrake pills. If it didn't kill you, nothing will. In fact, if drinking your dead relative's ashes didn't kill you, nothing did. 1874, William G. Rose. I'm going to go past this a little bit because he didn't even wait for a family member to die after his daughter died. He went out there, buried her, and burned her on the spot. Sidney Ryder, famous writer and bookseller, wrote about these accounts in 1888. And it was pretty interesting in his book notes, a bi-weekly thing. Now, the last person to be buried or exorcised for a vampire that we know of in New England was in 1892, Mercy Brown. The funny thing is, her mother, Mary, had died in 1883, December of 1883, and her sister Olive died in June of 1884. So within about 6 months of each other of consumption. Now, during that time, her brother became ill. He went to Colorado Springs to recover. At this time, they were treating tuberculosis. They were actually calling it tuberculosis now in the more affluent areas, but in the backwoods and places like Exeter, which was like really farm territory, they were still calling it consumption. They were treating it in Providence, Rhode Island, which is no more than 15, 20 miles down the road. And people were going to Colorado Springs and coming back all better. Well, he went to Colorado Springs and he felt better. He comes back. But in that time, Mercy had died on January 17th, 1892. So she had running consumption, took her 3 months away. So they put her in this keep, which they have in cemeteries to put the dead bodies when the winter will not allow burial because the ground is frozen. So Edwin Brown comes back. All of a sudden, he gets really sick, and they decide that a vampire is at large. Well, if Edwin dies, there's no more of the Brown family around, so the neighbors were all scared, going, oh, what is she going to do? She's going to come back after us. So the Brown family, George Brown, the father, said, well, I'm not, I don't believe in that kind of stuff. So, but he gave into the family, families or neighbors, whims, and he hired Harold Metcalf, a doctor from Wick, to go and dig up the family and prove that there is no vampire among them. Well, they get there with the people and they dig up the mom and daughter, the first daughter that died, and they're all bones. There's nothing there. And then they take Mercy out of the keep. And this is in March. This is like 2 months after she died, March 19th. And they open up the lid and she's fully preserved. Not only is she fully preserved, but there's blood on her mouth, around her mouth, and she had turned in her coffin. And they stand back all in a gasp because she's fully preserved and she hadn't begun to rot yet. Well, why would you? It's March. That thing was like a freezer. Right? It keeps on heated. So anyway, she probably stirred in her coffin because they removed the coffin from there. They knocked, banging it around. They didn't matter. They took the heart, the liver, the lungs out. They burned it on a rock over there, and then they fed Edwin the ashes. Now, it's kind of funny because he died anyway. But this is the wild thing. Being 1892, you've got the Statue of Liberty, electric cars, you got the telephone, electricity. This was not like, medieval times. So this word of this got around like wildfire. And the Providence Journal had one right here, and it said, exhumed the bodies, testing a horrible superstition in the town of Exeter. Bodies of dead relatives taken from the grave, and the belief that fresh blood would be found as they fed upon the bodies of the living. And then it goes on and on to say, and to make sure the cure was certain, the ashes of the heart and liver should be eaten by the person afflicted by this. In case the doctor does not know, the latter remedy is ordered or not, but it shows they're telling about how Edwin ate his sister, or consumed some of the remains of his sister to cure himself. Well, did it work? No. Edwin died on May 5th, 1892. And because of the widespread ridicule and everything else, including like this, believing in vampires, the idea of it kind of died out, or at least the idea of doing it in public died out. Whether there were more exorcisms after that, we don't know. There could have been hundreds more. But this was a Boston Globe in 1896 on a satirical article that not only tells about some of the instances in things of these people, several more actually that are not in this presentation, but some of them are misrepresented and everything with names. But it does tell about how Rhode Islanders believed that this was happening. And the best part about it, this is the best part about it is that all the cases that happened in Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, in Connecticut, they were all people from Rhode Island who moved to those places. So this was basically, Rhode Island is the vampire capital of New England. New England's the vampire capital of the world. In closing, this was one that was a mistaken vampire because of her grave. It says, I am waiting and watching for you in Exeter. Well, people thought it was meant, I am waiting and watching for you. She was, because of a school teacher once told they could find Mercy Brown, but didn't remember the name. And they found that cemetery and they thought that was a vampire. But that's a common little epitaph that would be put in those days in the 1800s, late 1800s. A few other cases were 1799 in Loudon, New Hampshire, 1810 in Bonsett, New Hampshire, 1847 to 1862 in Saco, Maine, and we visited that cemetery, and there were a lot of people who died in very rapid succession from consumption. So when the doctors who wrote the journals talked about that, it's not sure who, they didn't mention names, but that area was pretty intense for these people dying and being exorcised as vampires also. West Stafford, Connecticut, 1872 to 1878. There are many more, though. And today, who knows, we could find more and more. Dr. Michael Bell has found many more. We've found some instances like with the Rose family where who really died and was buried. So it was pretty insane time, but yet no one ever talks about it in the history of New England or anything, except you'll see it in books. I actually have all the books, original copies of the town records, of the town histories, and everything that actually mentioned this. So it's a very interesting subject. A few other facts before I quit is, again, I said that, a tilted gravestone means that something had risen from the grave. The word vampire entered the English language when printed in the Oxford Dictionary in 1734. It did not come to America until a Hartford Courant brought it to New England when they reprinted the definition in 1765. Professor Frey Ringel wrote in New England Gothic Literature, stated that the vampire scare in Vermont and Connecticut does stem from South County, Rhode Island families, and I did check that fact, and it's true. They did relocate. At one point, consumption was called the White Plague and was considered a romantic disease. Upper-class women made their skin up to look pale and corpse-like, much like a consumptive victim. Now, I'm sure these rural folk whose families were being wiped out left and right were not too happy about that. But it became a romantic disease because in 1828, Lord Byron, the famous writer, pronounced to everyone that he would rather die of consumption, thus turning it into a disease of artists as well. Interesting, huh? Any questions?
So Tom, hopefully you can hear me, Tom.
Yeah, I
You
can.
can hear me, all right. So we do have a couple of questions, and I encourage people to continue to get your questions into the chat.
Absolutely.
So Heidi, let's go with Andrea's question first. I'll address them as they come in here. So were the exorcisms supported by the church? Were there religious what were the religious reactions to these beliefs?
The exorcisms were not so much supported by the church, but the church did. Like in one case, one was a Congregationalist deacon, and they were done in some cases on church burial grounds. They were not supported by the church because the belief became so scary because there was nobody who was immune to it. So yes, you even have deacons at that time, in this early time, that you look talking about the end of Puritanism and the beginning of Congregationalists and Baptists and things like that. Well, not so much Baptists, but Congregationalists and other religions like that, which exorcism was not an issue. Catholic religion was also becoming around the 1860s. So toward the end of this vampire scare, they were coming into America. So I would hardly think that exorcisms were being saying, oh, don't do that. You know, they were actually being not supported, but not supported. So it was not a part of a religious thing. It was more a part of trying to get rid of a demon.
Heidi wants to know, why were the corpses so fresh looking when the family dug them up?
In some cases, when they died either in winter, which would, if they did put them there, in the keep, or was able to bury just before winter and the frost came, that was it. You know, they were preserved like you wouldn't believe. They didn't bury them 6 feet under so much like they do now. Some of them buried, you know, where they could and how deep they could. But also in some cases, the ground, and this is a fact, the ground, the earth can, being buried in a coffin, they'd be in a wooden coffin. The earth itself, the coffin could rot, or water or any kind of wet stuff could leak in, and you have minerals that would actually preserve the body. Too longer than usual, anyway.
Sure. Donna wants to know, is witchcraft somehow connected with vampirism?
Witchcraft and vampirism back then were not connected at all. A vampire was a spectral ghoul, and a witch was a witch. A vampire would suck the life out of you, and you know, you'd become gaunt, pale, get consumption, die, and then you'd in turn do it. And witches would put curses on you and cause either you to break a leg or your cattle to get sick. So, and then no, witchcraft and vampirism were totally separate entities, which made them fear even more, because now you got two enemies you're very scared of.
Andrea wants to know, were there vampire superstitions in other states or Canada during this time?
There were, but they're very, very few. Those who, you know, the old saying, move west, young man. There were people who did move west in the early 1800s and went to like places like Ohio and St. Louis area and that. And there are several cases there, and believe it or not, they're from New England. They hailed from New England, yes. I think there was a case in Canada as well, or two. But yeah, but they all hailed from New England, so it's kind of interesting.
Jessica, this is a somewhat related question. Jessica would like to know, what other parts of the world are known for having vampires?
Every culture in the world has some sort of blood-sucking demon or vampire that they deal with in folklore. So, I mean, like you look at Romania and you have the supposedly vampires there. One interesting thing I'd like to add too is when the newspaper came out for Mercy Brown in 1892, one man took it and found that newspaper clipping, and when he died, they were going through his belongings, and they found the newspaper clipping for Mercy Brown's case. That man was Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula.
Sure.
He took and he took some of the folklore from Romania and other places and created the book Dracula. Now, the interesting note is the town that this incident in Dracula takes place is called Exeter. So yes, every culture has a vampire.
So just a reminder to folks, we're going to wrap in about 5 minutes. So if you have any more questions or comments, feel free to type them into the chat. So Jennifer has a comment. She says, when we visited the Ray family graves, we found them easily because an earlier visitor had left plastic fangs atop each headstone. And then Jessica says, we go to the old tavern in Woodstock, Vermont, called Ransom Tavern. I wonder if it's connected to that family. I'm not going there anymore.
I bet you it is connected to the family, because the Ransom family. If you look back, I could look into the history of that. If she wanted to, get in touch with me through tomdagostino.com, I could actually look into the history and see if it was connected to Frederick Ransom. I mean, don't forget he was a Dartmouth College student, and to have a tavern, you'd have to have some sort of prestigious role in the town you're in, because they just wouldn't let anyone have a tavern. And if you owned a tavern, you probably had your own pew in the church also. So yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. And what was the other half of the question? The Ray family people. Yeah, the Ray family graves, the 4 of them. If you're standing looking at the graves, go to the right past the road, almost near the fence where the houses are, and you'll find the other Ray family, Henry Ray and his family. They're newer graves with small stones.
So a couple of comments while you were speaking came in. Heidi just said that she couldn't imagine losing 14 children. And Donna earlier said, amazing how life was before science and medicine and how superstitions prevailed. And I would argue even today, I feel like sometimes we're not following science and medicine. And then Donna, so we'll say last question goes to Donna. Why do you think the revival of vampires in current movies and TV shows, why do you think there is a revival of vampires in current movies and TV shows? I find them fascinating and addictive. So why have they popped up in pop culture the last 10, 15 years? They're very popular.
Probably because they've always been around, but it's funny because when I'm writing books, they'll be like, Bigfoot things. And so my publisher will go, oh, you want to write a Bigfoot book? And I'm like, no. And so vampires have become popular because it's just another cycle of something. And they are a mystical, creature, a mystique to everyone, a strange thing, and all cultures have them. And then you have this thing with our books that came out on the real history of vampires in New England. And it's just a culture thing that's spreading again. And you do have, and also because of the ghost shows, people are not so afraid to talk about things. So you have people who are like real life vampires. They practice it. And they don't live forever, but they will have phony teeth put in, but they'll practice as a living vampire, and they're not so afraid to come out with that like they would have been 10, 15 years ago. So ever since all these supernatural shows and ghost shows came out, the stigma is not so heavy on it.
And so just getting some positive comments in the chats, a lot of thank yous, a lot of great presentations. People want you to come back and give another presentation, Tom.
Oh, by all means. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening.
We'll have to do it on a night where we're not having a tropical storm. Other than the first 5-10 minutes, you were a little staticky. I think after that, everything came through pretty clear.
Good.
Yeah. There are some power outages around the state, so I'm sure we lost some folks. But overall, I thought this went a lot better than I expected. So you made it to the end, Tom. Everyone, let's give Tom a big virtual round of applause for joining us here tonight. Under tough circumstances, he did an excellent job. And just want to remind folks, you'll get an email tomorrow morning with a feedback survey. Would love for you to take 60 seconds and fill that out. That will help us plan programs for the fall. And maybe we'll see Tom in the fall. Maybe we'll see Tom in October. Who knows? Tom, do you have any last words for the group?
If they have questions or anything, they can go to our website, tomdagostino.com. And we have Dining with the Dead, 1031, where we do interactive ghost hunt investigational dinners in some of the finest places in New England. And And we are putting them on in person because these places are taking every single precaution to make sure everything is safe, limited amount of people and everything, and that kind of thing. So, yeah, and I just want to thank you, everybody, for coming in on Zoom and listening. And I really thought like I'd say good evening, everyone, and we'd lose power.
Yes, we had an unfortunate day here at the library. We had to cancel our community market, but this went off without a hitch. Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm going to wrap the meeting up here, and we'll see you guys all for a future program. Thanks so much, and have a great night.
Wow.
Yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed that. That was put on by the Tewksbury Library in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. Trying to listen to Tom's accent there and figure out if he's a masshole or not, but he's definitely a New Englander.
Right. Well, I wouldn't know, you see, because I obviously being English, I'm not
You're
really
from the
too
old
keen,
jolly old England.
too keen, not too knowledgeable on different accents of the states, really.
Yeah.
Although I do mock quite a lot, but then again, I mock my own accents as well.
Yeah.
From
I
my way.
listen to those accents and colloquialisms and stuff and try to pick them out.
Yeah,
Mine's pretty
yeah.
easy, but not always. But what you think
yeah,
about that?
you've got a little bit of southern in you, haven't you?
Yeah, I used to have a lot more, but I've lived in different parts
Yeah.
of the
Oh,
country.
see, I can tell the south from the north kind of thing, but
Yeah.
But I think most people can tell that.
I get that a lot in here in New England. I'll say something, people be like, "You're not from around here, are you?" Nope, not at all. But
No.
what do you think about that? The
Yeah,
legacy.
well,
of-
like I said, I've lived in the night my whole life. I've been called a vampire by many
I
many
love
people
it. Yeah, me
over
too.
my life.
I used to stay up all night and sleep all day. Still do to some
Yeah.
degree.
Well, it's like I can't stand light either. So whenever even if it's a cloudy day, I've usually got sunglasses on if I'm driving or anything.
Yeah, we
'Cause
like
I do not
the
like the
same
bright
way.
light.
We like cloudy, overcast, and particularly
Yep.
rainy, stormy days.
Yeah. Give me them
Just
days
don't
any day.
like the
Yeah.
sunshine at all.
And thunderstorms, I absolutely love them.
my
I'll
favorite
sit in
time
my
to go to
window
the
and watch a
beach.
thunderstorm.
My favorite time to go to the beach is when there's a big storm at sea
Yeah.
and the beach is
Oh, it's
deserted.
great,
and
isn't it?
watch
Yeah.
the waves crash. That's amazing.
Yeah, well, it's more lively, isn't it? It's more alive, when there's
So,
storm waves and the
it's
clouds are clapping and
nature. Yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah, mate. Yeah.
I don't want to go lay in the sun with all the
I'm
tourists.
kind of dark, mate, like that. Like I said, look at me pale skin. You can tell straight away I'm a vampire.
Same here.
Well, I reflect the sun as I should, but sometimes I do actually burn.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, see,
Yeah,
because I
I've
burn
burned
every
equally.
time.
Yeah. I wrote a little thing here. The legacy of vampire lore in New England extends beyond these historical accounts. It's permeated culture, inspiring countless novels, films, and television shows. From the gothic horror of Dark Shadows to the contemporary allure of Salem's Lot, vampires continue to fascinate and terrify audiences. Their image has evolved over time, from monstrous predators to romanticized figures, now reflecting changing societal attitudes and anxieties. The enduring appeal of vampire stories in New England lies in their ability to tap into deep seated fears and desires. They explore themes of mortality, the fragility of life, and the seductive power of darkness. The vampire, as both a terrifying villain and a tragic antihero, embodies the complexities of human nature. It serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the consequence of violating natural laws. In conclusion, the stories of vampires in New England are a testament to the power of folklore and the enduring human fascination with the supernatural. They offer a glimpse into the past when disease and death were shrouded in mystery and when fear and superstition reigned supreme. While the practices associated with these beliefs may seem archaic today, they remind us of the fragility of human existence and the enduring struggle to understand the forces that shape our lives. The vampire, as a symbol of both terror and allure, continues to haunt our imaginations, challenging us to confront our deepest fears and desires. Well, that's my take on it.
Yeah. I just don't sleep me, you know. So, and when I do, it's annoying because I only sleep for a couple of hours as well, and I'm up again. It's actually it's been my whole life like that. I've
Yeah.
always been a raging insomniac from
Me
you
too.
know,
And
young.
recently,
young
though, I've been so sleep deprived. I'm actually looking forward to naps and sleep now that newborn. I was
Well,
going
he's
to bring him
good.
on tonight, but I don't know if he's in. He was
He's
asleep earlier.
he's
I heard
taking
him.
your energies, mate. But they do
I
in the
heard.
first couple of years.
Yeah, but
You know,
it's totally worth it. But thanks for
oh,
the
it's brilliant.
congratulations on the baby. He will be 3 weeks old tomorrow at 4:31 p.m. Eastern time. Hard to believe it's
Look at
3 weeks
you counting the
already.
minutes,
Yeah,
mate.
yeah.
You'll soon get over that, mate. You'll soon...
Well, it's
yeah,
just,
but
uh,
it's a beautiful thing. Beautiful.
yeah. But
Yeah.
he's a real pistol.
Yeah, mate, it's great.
I
It's
hope
great.
everybody enjoyed this, and hello to people that are joining us for the first time from 13 past midnight and
Yeah.
on.
Hi,
I
guys.
did have us on Facebook and Twitter, but Elon wouldn't let people post, so I
Oh,
took it off the Twitter feed.
that's kind of pointless, isn't it?
Uh,
Because that's
uh,
just an audio thing that is there on Twitter, isn't it?
yeah,
You can't
I don't.
you,
I'm not sure. I
yeah, you
broadcast
can't
Twitter
actually share the
before.
video on there. You can
Yeah, so
only do uh what's that? You have a little echo, Steve.
you talking about the baby?
Oh, I don't know.
I think I
If
may
she's
be coming through on Lee. I don't know.
no, I doubt it, mate. This mic will not pick up.
Yeah,
Will not
you
pick
get
up
twice the
any
Steve for the price of
rebound.
one. Then how's that? No extra
Yeah.
charge.
Wow. Well, that was cool, mate. That is, like
Yeah,
I said,
and like I
I
said,
love
we're
me
working on
vampires.
something about vampires coming up, and I found this during some research, so you'll find out about that shortly. But
What
want
are
to
you
thank
calling
everybody.
shortly?
Yeah, shortly. Yeah, there you go.
Wait a minute.
You've been watching Sesame Street. 1, 2, 2.
One, I love to count. One, two,
Very well done.
That was a scary bird on that. There was a very, very scary big yellow bird, mate. I think they
Yeah,
ought to be banned from doing things like that.
they had some scary stuff. Snuffleupagus.
That big
was
yellow
that
bird
thing.
used to frighten the life out of me.
Yeah.
I used to want to wring its neck and eat it, you know, for Sunday lunch.
Well, that'd make a hell of a Thanksgiving dinner, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it just, mate? Well, I'd have invited the whole street, you know. Right, lads. Big yellow bird for dinner.
But welcome. We're kind of kicking off spooky season. We got more stuff coming up here and on 13 past midnight from beyond and missing persons and mysteries. So you can catch me on all those. I have a radio show, everything out there on the Glide Lewis Ground Zero Radio Network. And Lee here, he's live 3 nights a week.
I am.
Tuesdays.
Tomorrow night will be Radio 1FA back-to-back original tracks. It's a full pint of rock, mate, not half.
And hopefully, if time and baby permits, I'll be joining him over there on camera. I'll bring the baby over there.
Always,
tomorrow.
mate. Always. The door's left on the jar, you know.
Yeah.
Always permanently open for you to just come on in, you know.
I've had the baby over there a couple times. He likes to come on and listen to Lee.
Yeah,
so.
damn right, mate. Damn right.
And,
We've got
Lee
to bring
sings
him up with the
songs
music,
for him.
mate. We've
Yeah.
got to bring him up with the music. That's an absolute must. You know.
Yeah, he's got
Me and my
really
son,
long,
actually,
nimble fingers. I'm thinking he'll be a pianist or a guitar player.
Well, myself and Bailey, we were sat in my chill out zone last night, and we were having a whale of a time just going through all sorts of records. We was doing rock and metal and disco and all sorts of things. I was showing him some older stuff, and it was just mad how he's exactly like me in a way. He's become eclectic on his own, which is a mad thing, because without, obviously I've played music around him all his life, but for him to actually pick up on it and go right into what music he loves, his Spotify is just, 1 minute he'll have a disco record, the next minute he's got System of a Down there or something.
Yeah, that's the way my stuff is. It's very electric, very all over the place, and I don't
Yeah,
depending on
well,
my
that's the same
mood
as
and
me.
the
I
time of
can't.
day.
That's
And,
why I can't ever say there's one genre that's my favorite genre. There's just I just love
yeah,
me
I
music. You
like it
know.
all. There you go. And
Yeah.
that's one thing I appreciate about your music. It's timeless, and especially when you do those. I don't want to call them cover versions because they're recreations and
Yeah,
done in
they
your
are
style
recreations. They're not
on
karaoke
Saturday
tracks, are
night.
they?
But I can't wait. There's always some earworm. Anytime I watch your show, which is several times, I walk away with some. This week it's been the Love Online, the Kathita Cat Gray song has been stuck in my head, and Second Chances, Day by Day, that gets stuck in there a lot
Well,
too.
that's a
Love the
good
Hour.
thing, though. Like I said, if I can do that even with one record, industrially, that one record gets stuck in some producer's head somewhere, and they're like, that could go somewhere. Because the one thing you want out of a record is something the hook, isn't it? It's all about the hook,
Yeah,
and you remembering a song through a hook. That's what you want.
yeah. It's those earworms, that little part that
Yeah,
catches in your
that's
head.
it. And even if it annoys you, it's actually a good thing.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, and I just want to point out, Cisco Lady Liberty, she's got a show coming up in a little less than an hour. I'll drop a link there. It's 13 past midnight. It is
Right on.
3 spooky tales. She's got her spooky time going live. Suspense, The Price of Fear, which is with Vincent Price, and a CBS Mystery Theater Spookathon. So join her at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I was going to redirect to her, but it wouldn't be. You'd have to go over there and sit for almost an hour. So
Yeah, like I said, it's straight away afterwards.
yeah,
Or
but go ahead and click on the link, get signed in over there, click your notifications on so you know when it starts, and enjoy some good old time radio over there.
yeah, it is like old time radio, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, I love the old stories, the old because even as a kid, I remember the stories on the radio.
yeah.
My nan used to always listen to them. Well, I watch them. Or my nan,
They
obviously,
did.
'cause
They
she was brought
watched
up in the
radio.
era of the radio.
They watched radio back in the day
Yeah,
before television. My
yeah,
dad would talk
absolutely. Well,
about
they'd
that.
sit there and watch the
They
radio,
would
wouldn't they, and
sit
listen
in
to
the
the
living
story.
room and look at the radio and
Yeah,
listen to it. So
I know it's crazy. It's crazy. Like I said, my nan did that, to her dying day, kind of thing.
yeah,
And I used to sit with her because I stayed at my nan's most of my young life, and yeah, we used to always watch the old films and stuff as well, which was great. You know, all the vampire films as well. See, that's old Christopher Lee.
yeah,
Old Ted Branston was saying about Christopher Lee, and I'm like,
yeah.
straight
Christopher
away.
Lee was just a
Oh, he was
classic.
epic, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Epic.
Those Hammer films were just phenomenal. And I heard Ted Branson mentioning Caroline Monroe. She was in Dracula 72 AD. I met her way back in the day, like late 70s, early 80s.
All right.
And she's been in a lot of those B horror films and stuff. God bless her. She's 75 years old now. You wouldn't recognize her, but
Yeah.
she was in a lot of those movies
Happens
back
to
in
us
the
all,
day.
mate.
She's popular, yeah.
We all get there, buddy. We all get there. Unlike myself, obviously, because being a vampire, it's just,
There you go.
I've got a long ways ahead of me, like eternity.
All right. Well, I guess that's going to wrap it up here for this episode of From Beyond. Lee, do you have anything to add in the closing statement there?
Yeah. Well, no, just keep in touch, guys. Love to see you over at First Floor Audio, obviously, and around on the YouTube streets.
Yep. And that'll be, I'll put links on all my socials for Lee's show, Radio 1FA. Tomorrow night, I'll be on camera over there. And then absolutely be there Saturday night for Songs from the Mothership.
Yeah.
And
At least the
planning on
show's got
having
some
Holden on
titles.
camera with me. So if you want to see Holden, come to Lee's channel.
That's it. Yeah. We got audience of all ages.
Yeah. From 3 weeks to 300 years.
Well, I'm actually 320 years actually. So come on.
So everybody head over to Cisco's for some old time radio, and we're going to get out of here. Have a good night, everybody. Lee's going to play us out with Forward Momentum here.
Indeed.
Good night, folks.
Night, everybody. Thanks for coming.